Sienna God, hello all. Oshisahiya, good evening, and Wado, thank you for watching. So this is day 10, part A, of reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, an inquiry into values by Robert M. Pirsig. That's probably why he felt such a deep kinship with so many failing students in the back rows of his classrooms. The contemptuous looks on their faces reflected the same feelings he had toward the whole rational, intellectual process. The only difference was that they were contemptuous because they didn't understand it. He was contemptuous because he did. Because they didn't understand it, they had no solution but to fail and for the rest of their lives remember the experience with bitterness. He, on the other hand, felt fanatically obliged to do something about it. That was why his Church of Reason lecture was so carefully prepared. He was telling them, you have to have faith in reason because there isn't anything else. But it was a faith he didn't have himself. It must always be remembered that this was the 1950s, not the 1970s. There were rumblings from the beatniks and early hippies at this time about the system and the square intellectualism that supported it, but hardly anyone guessed how deeply the whole edifice would be brought into doubt. So here was Phaedrus fanatically defending an institution, the Church of Reason, that no one certainly in Bozeman, Montana, had any cause to doubt. A pre-Reformation Loyola. A militant reassuring everyone the sun would rise tomorrow when no one was worried. They just wondered about him. Or they just wondered about him. That's emphasized. But now, with the most tumultuous decade of the century between him and ourselves, a decade in which reason has been assailed and assaulted beyond the wildest beliefs of the 50s, I think that in this Chautauqua, based on his discoveries, it looked like, because the V is part of it's missing, it looked like disco/Aries, and I was like, what is that? Oh, discoveries. We can understand a little better what he was talking about. A solution for it all, if only that were true. So much of it lost, there's no way of knowing. Maybe that's why I feel like an archaeologist and have such attention about it. I have only these fragments of memory and pieces of things people tell me, and I keep wondering as we get closer if some tombs are better left shut. Chris sitting behind me suddenly comes to mind, and I wonder how much he knows, how much he remembers. Ooh. We reach an intersection where the road from the park joins the main east-west highway. Stop and turn onto it. From here we go over a low pass and into Bozeman itself. The road goes up now, heading west, and suddenly I'm looking forward to what's ahead. Chapter 14. We ride down out of the pass onto a small green plain. To the immediate south, we can see pine-forested mountains that still have last winter's snow on the peaks. In all other directions appear lower mountains, more in the distance, but just as clear and sharp. The picture postcard scenery vaguely fits memory, but not definitely. This interstate freeway we are on must not have existed then. The statement, to travel is better than to arrive, comes back to mind again and stays. We have been traveling and now we will arrive. For me, a period of the depression comes on when I reach a temporary goal like this and have to reorient myself toward another one. In a day or two, John and Sylvia must go back and Chris and I must decide what we want to do next. Everything has to be reorganized. The main street of the town seems vaguely familiar, but there's a feeling of being a tourist now, and I see the shop signs are for me, the tourist, and not for the people who live there. This isn't really a small town. People are moving too fast and too independently of one another. It's one of these population 15 to 30,000 towns that isn't exactly a town, not exactly a city, not exactly anything really. I kind of think they're like on their way to being like a boom town if they're like that population size, because clearly they're not like population 500 or 1,000 or something like that. And sometimes it takes generations to reach those numbers, but sometimes they're just spillover because the largest city by them has exploded, and so people are like, we got to get up out of here and go to where we have some sanity. You know what I mean? Like, good grief. Anyway, we ate lunch in a glass and chrome restaurant that brings no recall at all. It looks as though it's been built since he lived here and shows the same lack of self-identity seen on the main street. I go to a phone book and look for Robert DeWeese's number, but don't find it. I dial the operator, but she's never heard of the party and can't tell me the number. I don't believe it. Were they just in his imagination? Her statement produces a panicky feeling that lasts for a moment, but then I remember their answer to my letter telling them we were coming and calm down. Imaginary people don't use the mails. John suggests... Wait, what? I go to a phone book and look for Robert DeWeese's number, but don't find it. I dial the operator, but she's never heard of the party and can't tell me the number. I don't believe it. Were they just in his imagination? Her statement produces a panicky feeling that lasts for a moment. Then I remember their answer to my letter telling them we were coming and calm down. Imaginary people don't use the mails. Oh, wow. John suggests I try to call the art department or some friends. I smoke for a while and drink coffee, and when I'm relaxed again, I do this and learn how to get there. It's not the technology that's scary. It's what it does to the relations between people, like callers and operators, that's scary. From the town to the mountains across the valley floor must be less than 10 miles, and we cross that distance now on dirt roads through rich green high alfalfa ready for cutting, so thick it looks difficult to walk through. The fields sweep outward and slightly upward to the base of the mountains, where a much darker green of the pines rises suddenly up. That will be where the DeWeeses live, where the light green and dark green meet. The wind is full of light green, new mown hay smells and livestock smells. At one point, we pass through a cold bank of air where the smell changes to pine. But then I was thinking about how I love those smells, but my allergy is like, oh my God, it's bad, really bad. Like EpiPen bad, even though I love it. Makes me believe that like I was literally a farmer like many times over in past lives, and like all around livestock doing everything, and you know, in this lifetime I should think, yeah, so that you don't accidentally veer off into this path again that you continue to repeat. We're just gonna make you highly allergic to everything. Like, I tried though, I'm gonna tell you. Eyes swole shut, everything, hard breathing and stuff. I used to think that was normal, but anyway, that's a whole other thing. Let's see. At one point, we passed through a cold bank of air where the smell changes to pine, but then are back in the warmth again. Sunlight and meadows and the close looming mountain. Just as we get to the pines, the gravel in the road becomes very deep. We slow down to first gear and 10 miles an hour, and I keep both feet off the pegs to kick the cycle upright again if it should mush into the gravel and start to go down. We round a corner and suddenly enter the pines and a very steep V canyon in the mountain, and there right beside the road is a large gray house with an enormous abstract iron sculpture attached to one side, and beneath it, sitting in a chair tipped back against the house, surrounded by company, and the living image of DeWeese himself with a can of beer in his hands, which waves to us, right out of the old photographs. I'm so busy keeping the machine up, I can't take my hands off the grips, and I wave a leg back instead. The living image of DeWeese himself grins as we pull up. You found it, he says. Relaxed smile, happy eyes. It's been a long time, I say. I feel happy too. Though strange as suddenly seeing the image move and talk, we dismount and take off our riding gear, and I see that the open porch deck he and his guests are on is unfinished and unweathered. DeWeese looks down from where it is only a few feet above the road on our side, but the V of the canyon slants so steeply that on the far side the ground descends 15 feet below the deck. The stream itself appears another 50 feet down, away from the house among the trees and deep grass, where a horse partially hidden by the trees grazes without looking up. Now we have to look high to see the sky. Surrounding us is a dark green forest. We watched as we approached. This is just beautiful, Silveria says. The living image of DeWeese smiles down at her. Thank you, he says. I'm glad you like it. His tone is all here and now, it completely relaxed. I realize that although this is the authentic image of DeWeese himself, it's also a brand new person who's been renewing himself continually, and I'm going to have to get to know him all over again. We step up onto the deck. Between the floorboards, it has spaces like a grate. I can see the ground through them with a, well, I'm not quite sure how to do this tone and smile. DeWeese makes introductions all around. but they're in one ear and out the other. I can never remember names. His guests are an art instructor from the school who has horn-rimmed glasses and his wife who smiles self-consciously. They must be new. Oh, yeah. We talk for a while, Deweese mainly explaining to them who I am, and then from where the deck disappears around the corner of the house suddenly comes Jeannie Deweese with a tray of beer cans. She is a painter too, and I'm suddenly aware, a quick comprehender, and already there's a shared smile over the artistic economy of grabbing a can of beer instead of her hand. While she says, some neighbors just come over with a mess of trout for dinner. I'm so pleased. I try to think of something appropriate to say, but just nod. We sit down, I in the sunlight, where it's difficult to distinguish details of the other side of the deck in the shade. Deweese looks at me, seems about to comment on my appearance, which is undoubtedly much different from what he remembers, but something deflects this, and he turns to John instead and asks about the trip. John explains that it's been just great, something he and Sylvia have needed for years. I thought I felt an ant. We're putting out pecan shells. I was gonna say hulls, same difference. For like on the vegetables and the planter boxes, so that the Texas heat does not like continue to evaporate the moisture and like fry the plants and stuff, hopefully. Sylvia seconds this. Just to be out in the open in all this space, she says. Lots of space in Montana, Deweese says, a little wistfully. He and John and the art instructor become involved in get acquainted talk about differences between Montana and Minnesota. The horse grazes peacefully below us, and just beyond it, the water sparkles in the creek. The talk has shifted to Deweese's land here in the canyon, how long Deweese has lived here, and what art instruction at the college is like. John has a real gift for casual conversation like this that I've never had, so I just listen. After a while, the heat from the sun is so great, I take off my sweater and open my shirt. Also to stop squinting, I bring out some sunglasses, put them on. That's better. But it blanks out the shade so completely I can hardly see faces at all, and leaves me feeling sort of visually detached from everything but the sun and the sunlit slopes of the canyon. I think to myself about unpacking, but decide not to mention it. They know we're staying, but just intuitively allow first things to happen first. First we relax, then we unpack. What's the hurry? The beer and sun begin to toast my head like a marshmallow. Very nice. I don't know how much later I hear some comments about the movie star here come from John, and I realize he is talking about me and my sunglasses. I look over the tops of them in the shade and make out that Deweese and John and the art instructor are smiling at me. They must want me in the conversation, something about problems on the trip. They want to know what happens if something goes bad mechanically, John says. I relate the whole story of the time Chris and I were in the rainstorm and the engine quit, which is a good story but somewhat pointless. I realize I am telling it as an answer to his question. The final line about being out of gas brings the expected groan. And I even told him to look, Chris says. Both Deweese and Jeannie comment on Chris's size. He becomes self-conscious and glows a little. They ask about his mother and his brother, and we both answer these questions as best we can. The heat of the sun finally becomes too much for me, and I shift my chair into the shade. The marshmallow feeling leaves in the sudden chill, and after a few minutes, I have to button up. Jeannie notices and says, as soon as the sun goes over the ridge up there, it gets really cold. The distance between the sun and the ridge is narrow. I'd judge that although it's only the middle of the afternoon, less than half an hour of direct sun remains. John asks about the mountains in the winter, and he and Deweese and the art instructor talk about this and about snowshoeing in the mountains. I could just sit here forever. Oh, I bet. Sylvia and Jeannie and the art instructor's wife talk about the house, and soon Jeannie invites them inside. My thoughts drift the statement about Chris's growing so fast, and suddenly the feeling of the tomb comes on. I've heard only indirectly of the time Chris lived here, and yet to them it seems that he's hardly been gone. We live in entirely different time structures. What? The conversation shifts onto what is current in art and music and theater, and I'm surprised at how well John keeps up his end of the conversation. I'm not basically interested in what's new in these areas, and he probably knows it, and for that reason never talks about it to me. Just the reverse of the motorcycle maintenance situation. I wonder if I look as glassy-eyed now as he does when I talk about rods and pistons. Just glaze over, right? But what he and Deweese really have in common is Chris and me. And a funny stickiness is developing here. Ever since the movie star comment, John's good-natured sarcasm towards his old drinking and cycling companion is chilling Deweese slightly, causing resultant respectful tones toward me from Deweese. These seem to increase John's sarcasm in a self-stoking way, and they both sense this, and so they kind of veer away from me onto some subject of agreement and then come back again, but the stickiness develops and they veer away again onto another agreeable subject. Anyway, John says, this character here told us we were in for a letdown when we came here, and we still haven't gotten over this letdown. I laugh. I hadn't wanted to build him up to it. Dewey smiles too, but then John turns to me and says, geez, you must have been really crazy. I mean, really nuts to leave this place. I don't care what the college is like. I see Deweese look at him, shocked, then angry. Deweese looks at me, and I wave it off. Some kind of impasse has developed, but I don't know how to get around it. It's a beautiful place, I say weakly. Deweese says defensively, if you were here for a while, you'd seen another side to it. The instructor nods in agreement. The impasse now produces its silence. Well, I mean, yeah, places seem nice on the outside, and then after you live there a while, then you get like the hierarchy and dynamics and the whatevers and the, yeah, and then probably like weather and animals and all that. The impasse now produces its silence. It's an impossible one to reconcile. What John said wasn't unkind. He is kinder than anyone. What he knows, and I know, but Deweese doesn't know, is that the person they're both referring to isn't much these days. Just another middle-class, middle-aged person getting along, worried mainly about Chris, but beyond that, nothing special. But what Deweese and I know, and the Sutherlands don't know, is that there was someone, a person who lived here once, who was creatively on fire, with a set of ideas no one had ever heard of before, but then something unexplained and wrong happened, and Deweese doesn't know how or why, and neither do I. The reason for the impasse, the bad feeling, is that Deweese thinks that person is here now, and there's no way I can tell him otherwise. For a brief moment, way up at the top of the ridge, the sun diffuses through the trees, and a halation of the light comes down to us. The halo expands, capturing everything in a sudden flash, and suddenly it catches me too. He saw too much, I say, still thinking about the impasse. But Deweese looks puzzled, and John doesn't register at all. And I realize the non sequitur too late. Too late. In the distance, a single bird cries plaintively. Now suddenly the sun is gone behind the mountain, and the whole canyon is in dull shadow. To myself, I think how uncalled for that was. To myself, I think how uncalled for that was. Oh, uncalled for that was. Okay. You don't make statements like that. You leave the hospital with the understanding that you don't. Jeannie appears with Sylvia and suggests we unpack. We agree, and she shows us to our rooms. I see that my bed has a heavy quilt on it instead, against the cold of the night. Beautiful room. In 3 trips to the cycle and back, I have everything transferred. Then I go to Chris's room to see what needs to be unpacked, but he's cheerful and being grown up and doesn't need help. I look at him. How do you like it here? He says, fine, but it isn't anything like the way you told about it last night. When? Just before we went to sleep in the cabin. I don't know what he's referring to. He adds, you said it was lonely here. Why would I say that? I don't know. My question frustrates him, so I leave it. He must have been dreaming. When we come down to the living room, I can smell the aroma from the frying trout in the kitchen. At one end of the room, Deweese is bent over the fireplace holding a match to some newspaper under the kindling. We watch him for a while. We use this fireplace all summer long, he says. I reply, I'm surprised it's this cold. Chris says he's cold too. I send him back up for his sweater and mine as well. It's the evening wind, Deweese says. It creeps down the canyon from up high where it's really cold. The fire flares suddenly and then dies and then flares again from an uneven draft. It must be windy, I think, and look through the huge windows that line one wall of the living room. Across the canyon in the dusk, I see sharp movement of the trees. We'll leave it there. Done to go, Hank. Okay, you mean a good shot. To meet again. Love you, mean it.